All right, Samantha back here with Up to Speed, and we've got a great show today. Michael Colitti with Hiring Done Right. We're going to be talking in and outs of hiring, firing, employee matters, and all the things that we need to know as business owners. And a lot of us out there listening are agency owners, and I don't care what industry you're in, Michael, hiring people and having employees that are happy is probably one of the hardest parts of being a business owner. So I'm jazzed to dive in today and just learn all about ways that we could be better at it, right?
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about, just the hiring 101 and the terminating of employees 101. Like, what do we need to know? Why is it so hard?
If I knew the answer for that, I'd be a very rich man right now. So, again, this phrase has been around a long time: hire slow, fire fast, right? And so if you break that down, so much goes into the hiring process, because too often we are so focused just on the technical side of the job. Do they have the experience? Do they have the skills necessary? And what we forget is that so many of these skills can be taught. And so we get too bogged down on what job descriptions have these people had, what kind of titles have they held. And we're missing probably 80% of who the person really is. So when we talk about hiring slow, we're talking about finding out about their behavioral traits, their cognitive abilities. Do they have the ability to do the job that they're seeking for you? And there's so many great tools out there for employers. First of all, hiring practices. Are their interviews correct? The supervisors doing the interviewing, have they ever been trained on not just what to say, but what not to say?
It's hard to interview people.
It is so difficult, because there's a lot of good people out there. But there's a lot of bad people who pretend to be good people.
Yes.
And so when the supervisors are interviewing individuals, if they don't know what question to ask, that can really throw you off. And one of the biggest things I try to teach my supervisors is that silence is golden. If you ask a question, hopefully it's a behavioral question, so it's not just a yes or no. But if the person needs a few seconds or even a minute to come up with an answer, give them that time. Don't throw something in there to take up that time. You have to be comfortable with silence yourself. And if you're not, you're just not going to get a really valuable interview with
But
that.
it's so important. Like, I always love when you ask, what are some of your big failures, or what are your points of needing to, where do you feel like you stumble, right? I always love that question, because if somebody can't come up with something, or they are quick to respond, that to me tells me, maybe they're not really understanding, where they need a little bit more improvement. But it's also like, when you're interviewing, it's the best, they're going to be. It's the audition.
I was telling a client that just about an hour and a half ago.
And if it's not feeling right then and there, that's usually maybe a good indication that it's not a great fit for you or your company, or even just your environment. Because culture and having a culture fit, we always said fit before functionality, because they needed to be a good cultural fit in the firm, because one bad hire can be chaotic. How do you train yourself to be more of a better interviewer? Because I do think that is such an important part of the beginning process.
And I love the way you phrase that, right? How do you train yourself? Because a lot of people look at this as a task, but it's not. It is a skill set. And if you do a lot of them, then you tend to be a little bit better, because you can pick up on things. Mm-hmm. But if you don't do them for long periods of time, then most interviews that I've known are probably as nervous, if not more nervous, than the person that they're interviewing.
Sure.
So if you're going to do it, number one, you need to sit back after the fact and ask yourself, okay, how did I do? Was I uncomfortable? Why was I uncomfortable? But being prepared going into it is probably the most important thing. Figure out, what are you really hiring for? Do you have your job descriptions there? Have they been updated? Are they truly what you're looking for? Do you have a set list of questions that you can ask? Now, you can deviate from that, right, as you get an answer from a candidate. If you're thinking, well, I need to take this thread for a little while, but you always come back to the list of questions. And again, we can get into the legal side of that. Again, I'm not an attorney. None of this is legal advice.
Yes, we will, disclaimer.
But have your set of questions, because number one, you want to make sure that you are looking at apples to apples. If you're asking all the candidates the same questions, then you can identify, okay, these people had the better answers than these other individuals, and then you start calling people out of the herd there. If I could really quickly, is applications.
Yes.
Have to have an application. You have to make sure, before you talk to anybody, make sure that application is complete, and that you're you're interviewing off that application. You can also interview off the resume, but the application is important because they hopefully have that little acknowledgement at the bottom. Everything on this application is true and correct. Nothing has been omitted. Because if you find out somebody lied, then it's a much cleaner term because they falsified a company document.
Yeah. I've never had an applicant. I always just would interview off a resume.
Well, resumes are fluff pieces.
Yeah.
It's a marketing piece. I could put that I'm second in line for the King of England.
Yeah.
Right? It's a marketing piece. But if I put that on an application and I'm not really second in line, now it's hey, you've lied to us. You can go away.
It's good.
So again, there are things that you need to look at. Plus, you mentioned earlier that this is the best they're going to be. They want something from you right now.
Yep.
So if you're going to have somebody fill out the application, and when you get that application, before you sit down with them, if there are misspelled words, if a lot of things are left blank, they're not following through on a basic request to fill out an application, then you can't be surprised if you hire this person when they're not listening to you, or they don't have the detail orientedness that you need in something like this. So applications are critical. I strongly recommend it. Don't talk to anybody unless you have an application.
I like that. Everyone in your life should have to submit an application before you press go, right?
Absolutely. My daughter's boyfriends. Fill out an application.
Give me the application.
Yeah.
So here's something interesting, and you mentioned it before, was the job description, because I know a lot of times people, when they're hiring, maybe they've got a small firm and they're just, trying to fill a void with the CSR or salesperson. Yeah. They're not very specific with what it is that they're looking for. And so again, when you're hiring someone and they're not succeeding and it's, not working out, well, what are we looking for? I think that is something that needs to be very clear when we're going through this exercise.
Okay, we're going to go through a rabbit hole now. So there's again two. Or actually probably more than two reasons we're doing this. Number one, functionality. You want to make sure that the candidate you're getting truly understands what is going to be expected of him or her in the position. So having updated job descriptions is important for that way. You don't want to have somebody start and say, oh, I know we talked about these two things, but you also have these 10 other things that we're going to hold you accountable for. Well, the person may not have experience in these 10 other things. And so now you're setting them up to fail. So make sure that you have updated job descriptions. Let the person read it, that they acknowledge that they've read it, they understand what's expected of them. Also, always put at the very bottom of your duties and all other duties assigned by managers, because we're starting to get a lot of employees now that are pushing back, well, it's not in my job description. Well,
not my job. Those are famous last words.
They should be famous last words, right? But that's neither here nor there. The other area about this is physical requirements of the job. We can talk about disabilities. We can talk about personal injury, illness, a workplace injury. And again, it gets a little bit detailed, but when you talk about disability discrimination, right? If somebody is injured and they have restrictions on the job, it comes down to, can they perform the essential functions of the job, either with or without a reasonable accommodation? And under the ADA specifically, it says that you can list what you need to for an essential function. Again, it has to be reasonable.
Yep.
But if this is something that is an essential function, it has to be listed before the person gets injured or gets ill. Because then if you start throwing essential functions, then it can lead to problems. It doesn't mean it's not going to be an essential function, but it just complicates the matter. Well, it was an essential function before, now I'm sick, now this is an essential function, are you discriminated against me? So you want to just take away all that stuff. Plus, it lets people know, this is what you're going to be doing. It's a physical job. You're going to be out in the cold in a warehouse, or it's going to be really hot in the summertime. Is that something you can do? You're going to be standing on your feet, 7 hours out of 8 every day.
Yep.
Is that something that not just that you can do, are you going to be okay with that?
Yep.
Again, back to culture. We want people who fit the job because they're going to be much happier in their position. Translates into longer retention, happier customers. Expenses go down because people are doing their productivity rises when they're there for a long period of time. It all relates to each other.
Well, and they also understand the assignment, right? So what I'm signing up for is what I'm getting. It's different than I signed up for a desk job and I'm back in the warehouse.
Yeah.
Very different things.
Yeah.
So now let's move into, we're in California, so we live in this really wonderful litigious state that's just, woo! Every time you turn around, you learn about something you can't do as an employer.
Yeah.
But, when it comes to the bad hire or the employee that is no longer working out for us, that termination process, because, you're fired is an interesting set of words that, you got to be really careful with how you transmit those words these days. And talk to us a little bit about, the correct way to roll that out, to not avoid a legal moment because, hey, you know what, anybody could sue you for anything.
Yeah.
But what are some steps that maybe we can have that can help us not have to get there?
First and foremost, we're an at-will state, right?
And what does that mean for people that don't understand?
Employees are allowed to quit the job whenever they want. Yeah, there's no contract. Employers are allowed to fire anybody they want at any time for no reason at all. And it sounds good in theory, but unfortunately we're in California, and you should really always have a reason. Unless you're somebody that every day walks in grumpy and says, okay, you know what, you're fired today. Okay, you know what, you're fired today. Then if that's who you are, and that's how you run your company, then you may say, okay, well, this person is truly at will, and that's just the way it is. But most companies aren't like that. So don't rely on at will. You need to have some good reason for that. So on termination, and again, there's so many things that encompass this. First of all, do you have your documentation?
Paper the file. That's what we say. Paper the file.
You've got to paper that file. And again, it comes back down to your supervisor group, right? Because I think most of them want to do a good job. They don't understand how to do it. And all they know is if they mess up, they're going to get sued. And so a lot of times they will back off thinking, well, I just don't know what to do. So number one, teach your supervisors. This is what we mean by documentation. I mean, start at the very beginning. Set your expectations for the employees. Train them, retrain them if you have to. Have that good culture where they can come to you if they're having any doubts. But make sure you're documenting every step of the way what's going on. Because if you do a termination, the person can just come back with anything. I've had clients that have had more wrongful termination claims over the last 2 years, and it's not that the employee was wrongfully terminated. There's all kinds of documentation that the person was failing. They said they understood they were failing, but when it came time for termination, there's always an attorney that takes that. So you can't do anything that will keep you from ever getting sued. If anybody ever tells you that, I think they're lying. But you can certainly protect yourself by having the proper documentation. Make sure it's consistent, not just within a department, that a supervisor is treating all his or her employees the same, but all the supervisors are all treating their employee group similarly. Right? It doesn't have to be exactly the same because some departments are a little different than others, but do it properly. And then again, you fire as quickly as you can, because if you have a problem employee, the longer you keep him or her on board, the longer they have to have that slip and fall that nobody saw, the longer they have to download information that you want them downloading or just coming up with information. And
the bad piece of fruit?
Yeah.
And it sits next to the good fruit, and then everybody else starts, you have a bad employee, and it can be so detrimental, and it's things that you don't even realize. And one thing that was said to me years ago was when you start to hope, that's when it's time to make some choices, because when you start to hope someone's behavior turns around or they'd start to do a better job, maybe that person, that's the trigger point that you're like, okay, you know what, this might not be the right place for you. And a lot of people, I think, hold on and they allow these toxic environments to kind of fester because they don't know as an employer what to do because they're afraid of being sued or they're afraid of the repercussions to the team. Yeah. And I think you're causing a bigger problem by not putting your foot down and protecting the team in that way. You know what I mean?
I agree, and in two different ways. Your fruit, right? You have a bad employee that now other employees are watching that thinking, well, this person's not working, they're taking long breaks, why can't I? So now you have all these other employees being less productive and becoming a bigger risk. But you always have good employees that see this and think, I'm not going to act like this, but it frustrates me being in this environment where nothing gets taken care of. So now you keep the bad fruit while the good fruit are saying, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to go find another employer that deals with problems the way they need to deal with it. So yeah, it hurts you on so many levels.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting conversation, and one that I think we're all constantly like, thank goodness for you and your role, because employers everywhere, I don't care again what industry you're in, like people are the hardest part of the show, keeping them happy, keeping them engaged, and keeping that good culture in that office, because honestly you create the company that you want to work for, right?
Exactly.
And you want to surround yourself with the people that you're excited to come to work next to, and also them. And so I think that's really the end result, but getting there is so dang hard. And I don't feel it getting easier.
Well, it's not. I mean, with the politicians, with all the laws that they keep putting on to employers, our politicians now they're kind of running the businesses in a certain way. They're telling you how much to pay employees, what kind of benefits you have to give them. So it is getting more difficult, but also just societally, right? We're not training kids to become good members of society. I mean, the California high school exit exam, was disbanded 10 years ago, right? And they got rid of the California high school exit exam. It's because you had to, as a graduating senior, you had to show that you were proficient in 10th grade English and 8th grade math. And because so many kids were failing that, they said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. We're just going to give everybody retroactively their high school diploma.
Yeah, just get out there.
So now for employers, it's very difficult because they think, okay, these kids are coming with at least a little bit of skill. And they're not. And now it's, again, the onus is on employers. Okay, so how am I going to make this up? Which means that the hiring becomes so much more important. If you have somebody that is going to be communicating with your clients, do they have the ability to communicate with clients? If you have somebody that's going to need to do math, you can't rely on, well, they've got a high school education, they can do basic math, not necessarily. And it's really sad. So there's a lot of societal things that are now poking employers, and employers are thinking, well, yeah, I never had to deal with this. Well, you do now. And so that's part of our job, is strategically look forward to employers. Hey, these are the things that you need to be aware of. Start getting your plans in place. Here are some options for you. But yeah, it's getting so difficult to do.
Well, and the
business.
employees want to work different. So here we are in this new era where, the work from home moment was kind of, it was a little like only for us, people that owned a business or could manage their time better. And then we had a COVID moment where everybody was work from home. Yeah. And now you've got, you hear every day, such and such company is requiring people to come back to work, and everybody's up in arms because nobody wants to go to work in an office anymore, or many don't. And so that, I think, poses its own set of issues, because there's a certain amount of, yes, you're saving time on the commute, but I mean, hey, the phone rings, I'm supposed to be at work, I'm going to go answer, I'm going to do my law. I mean, there's a certain amount of messing around that's going on with, not everybody can work from home, is basically what I'm getting at.
Absolutely.
And so what do you say to that as a new, topography that we have that we never had to work with before?
Yeah, so again, first of all, remote work may be a good option for certain positions. We like to do black and white, right? Binary. Either you can or you can't. But within an organization, there may be certain positions, because they're hard to fill, because you can find somebody 100 miles away, but they can't make that commute every day. So you know what? In this position, we don't really need them on site every day. So first and foremost, for employers, I think it is a good option for reasonable accommodations. Be open to that. But you have to identify what positions may lend themselves to that.
I mean, our audience is primarily going to be insurance people, right? Yeah. Office people. So working from home, I think, could work very much for many of our, fellow agents and agency owners out there. However, how do you manage the output of the staff without being a micromanage moment? How do you control that as an agency owner? Again,
it's the manager has to learn how to do that, and there are ways you can help build up that skill set. I think hybrid positions are really good, because I think it's important for remote workers to have that face-to-face, because you build camaraderie, you build teamwork, and I don't know about you, I do so many Zooms with clients, but when I get to go out there, sit down with them face-to-face,
so much better.
Well, you get so much more information, because you can ask them a question, and you get a funny look that you may not pick up on Zoom, and then the answer that they give you, you're thinking, yeah, but what else, right? There's something else.
Yep.
So I think a hybrid, the communication to employees, letting them know, again, it's part of our culture. We value teamwork. We value our clients, and in order to satisfy our clients the best way possible, we need to have face-to-faces with everybody here on site. Now, it may not be every day. It may be once a week, it may be a couple times a week, it may be once a month. But getting that face-to-face is important. And then just make sure that the job is set up for it. Look, these have metrics set in place. So when you talk about updating job descriptions, okay, if this is important enough to be on a job description, how can we measure this? What kind of metrics do we have?
Sure.
There's a lot of great software programs out there now, which employers should invest in if they're going to have remote work, to find out, is this person even logged onto their computer?
Do they have something pushing the button? You always see like the
Yeah.
little TikTok videos where you
Yeah.
got the girl that's just pushing the button in the side.
Yeah.
It is. There are several different software programs that are out there, and I always wonder, like, are you spying on people? Are you making them feel like, if I have to look into that, then maybe that's not the right role for that person. But I do think you've got to make sure there is a return on the investment, because you're allowing this flexibility as an employer, but you've got to be able to make sure that the employee is fulfilling their part of the bargain, right?
Absolutely. And again, this is where I think I differ from a lot of HR out there, because HR traditionally, and they get a bad rap for this, is emotionally driven on a lot of things. And I'm a big believer that employees need to be taken care of. I think it's the right thing to do personally, ethically. But for an ROI, right, you put a lot of payroll into, a lot of money into these individuals, a lot of benefits. So what are we getting in return? The software, as far as the privacy issues, again, there are laws coming out for that as well. If you have somebody has a laptop or they have a company phone, and you put a tracker on that, you're allowed to track them while they're at work, on working time. But you got to make sure that it is off nights and weekends, or if they're on their own time. If they go on vacation, you can't be tracking them what they're doing. That's a privacy violation. There's new AI stuff coming out, and it's going to have to do with, there's going to be more privacy issues at stake here. This is all new. We're all learning about this at the same time, so there's going to be mistakes. The laws, unfortunately, that have been written, in my opinion, as I read them, are very gray.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
the goalpost keeps moving.
And the goalpost.
And so it's like, just when we think we got it all figured out, then we've got a cyber element we got to worry about, and we've got, if you're at home and who else has access to your system, and what are, there's so many different things. But I do think setting the tone and setting the expectations as an employer for what the output is and what the employees are supposed to be doing. I think just going back to that general basic job description is huge.
Yeah, it is.
And it sounds so simple, but it really is that simple. It's like,
and set metrics.
Get it down. Get it down.
Set metrics. And if I could really quickly, also, one of the things with COVID, people went remote, and the employers forgot to tell them, hey, look, if you move, you need to let us know. Because employees were moving not just to a different city, they were moving to different states.
Yes.
And now the employer is saying, okay, we want you to come on back, and we're having a meeting. Well, I'm out here now. And that just complicates the issue. So again, if you're going to have a remote policy, I don't think it's a problem in and of itself.
But the laws are different, the taxes are different, the work comp.
Yeah, manage it properly, set the right expectations. And
that's tough. It's just,
it is.
Again,
it is. But to get a good employee, sometimes you may need to go remote.
Sometimes you got to do it. And
sometimes
that person in Michigan's the right moment, right? You never know. Or Nebraska or Wyoming.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've really kind of subscribed to a methodology and created this incredible thought is the hiring continuum. Can you tell me a little bit about what this is and how it came to be? Because I was reading up on it. It's very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, about 10 years ago, I was really frustrated because you hire, you train, you fire. And it's like people on a treadmill.
Yep.
The basis for this was that with the right, number one, if you're getting the right person, you shouldn't hire somebody just for this position they're going into. I mean, sometimes you may need to. But to get the most bang for your buck, you want to hire people for the next 2 or 3 positions that they may have for your company. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, you have somebody that hopefully will stay with you for a while. Number two, a person, and this is shown in studies, if a person fits their job, they're going to be happier, they're going to stay there, they're going to get more productive, their clients are going to be happier because they're happier. So the hiring continuum is you don't hire for just one position. You hire for future positions as well.
Nice.
And again, we got a great number of assessments that are out there which help define job fit for an organization, and then we can customize it to an organization, a position in that organization, and then you interview individuals, you come down with your top 3 candidates, and then you assess them to find out, okay, who's closest to this fit for this position, but what else could they do? Current employees, you can get these performance models for any position in the company, because you may have somebody who, with evolution of an organization, with evolution of just an industry, they may have been such a great employee 10 years ago, but they've been struggling the last 3-4 years. We don't want to let a 10-year-old employee go, right? Is there another place in the organization that, with their behavioral traits, that they may be a good fit? Because it's so much cheaper just to move somebody that you know is good.
Yep.
That's going to be there than having to go out into the market and say, okay, what am I going to get in this applicant pool now? So the continuum is just, you got to look strategically what's going on, have a plan in place, have a process, and then employees, you let them know, we want you here. We want to help you grow. And back in the 60s, 70s, even part of the 80s, everybody had this manpower planning, right? You had your high potential people, and these are the ones that we think can make different goals. We have tools now that can really help you identify these, and not just management, but for sales, for customer service, specifically for those areas. But they're wonderful. They are wonderful, and it's just changing the mindset of an organization back to culture.
Yep. It's all about, it's so funny how it all goes back to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think some of the best employees I ever had, started front desk or on these lower end roles and moved on up into account management and even sales, because then they could see, hey, I like doing that, or hey, I'd like to learn how to do that.
Yep.
And it is something about getting the right person in the right role.
It is.
And so sometimes maybe even when you hire someone for role A and you're around them a little bit and you go, you know what? This may be a better fit for you.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to see somebody fail. Nobody wants to fail. And as an employer, you should be able to empower someone to not fail. Unless it's just, not a good fit, because that happens too. But for the most part, we're trying to avoid that, being that we're going through all these different motions and trainings to be better at our hiring.
Well, yeah, and again, if you have a good employee that starts to fail, right? It's a couple of things. Number one, is there something happening outside of work, or is there something happening inside of work that's really taking them off their game? But number two, are they bored? Have they done what they need? They need another challenge. And sometimes they say, God, they were so good, we need to fire them. They're just not producing. Well, maybe you need to give them another challenge. So that is a move. And so there's so many different ways of looking at this. And it's my whole thing is we have to make sure that we are minimizing expenses for the company. We're maximizing profits. And you do that by taking care of your people. You've got to take care of your people.
And you said something interesting before. It wasn't so much about the tasks and what they're able to do. It was more about the behavioral traits of how they're going to respond. And I am a firm believer. And once I realized how to communicate with people and what the science was behind how people work and how they operate, everything changed for me as a person who was in a position of hiring people. Yeah. Because, it wasn't just about, hey, she can do this, or hey, she did this. Hey, how's she going to play in this sandbox over here? Yeah. How's she going to manage this? How are these two personalities going to work? Because sometimes that in itself is a game of chess. Managing the different personalities within an office. One of the things that I only ever hear people say they have is when they're a bigger firm, or because their EPLI carrier, their employer liability carrier, is asking them for their employee handbook. How important is this? And everybody should have one, right? It's not challenging.
It's not challenging. First of all, there are certain policies that are required to have. You have to give people your discrimination policy, your EO policy. Let them know about wage and hours, breaks, lunches, all those types of things.
Days off.
Paid sick leave. That's now a requirement in California. It's been a requirement for a while. Depending on the size of the company, there are a lot of things that smaller employers don't need. Even if you have 2-3 employees, I strongly encourage something like this. If you have 5 employees, there's a lot more laws that you're required to follow in California. A quick example is FMLA, right? Mm-hmm. The Federal Family Medical Leave Act. It has a 50 employee threshold. Well, California has a similar leave. It's called the California Family Rights Act, CFRA. The CFRA used to have the 50 employee threshold like FMLA. Mm-hmm. So a lot of smaller employers never worried about it. But 7-8 years ago, California dropped that threshold to just 5 employees.
Wow.
And so there are a lot of employers that I'm running into now, smaller with 10, 12 employees.
No idea.
And they have not been offering this to their employees. So you need to have this, and it's not just for the legal side of it. The compliance is important, but this is something you're informing your employees on what their rights are, but also what your expectations are.
This is the playbook.
And this
is the menu of services. This is what we got. This is what we got to do.
And this is part of the documentation, right? Uh-huh. Because you're telling employees up front, this is what we require of you. If you deviate from this, then you may be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination. And that assists so much with just writing people up. And I've helped so many supervisors, just go back to the handbook. Just take this section here and highlight the area, and this is why we're talking to you now. And if it continues.
Well, it also, I think, sets a tone of the who, what, when, where, why. Like who we are, why we are, what we do, how we do it.
Yeah.
Something as simple as what time we come to work, what we wear to work.
No pajamas, please.
Yeah, you gotta wear shoes,
Yeah.
right? You gotta brush your hair. The time thing I always find so interesting about, if the expectation is our hours as an organization are 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever it is, and you got the person that's rolling in at, 9:45.
Yeah.
Or 10 o'clock. I had a girlfriend of mine the other day. She goes, the girl's first day of work, she shows up an hour late, and I fired her. And I go, well, yeah, if it's the first day, and you didn't have a car problem or something, that's...
And you didn't even call.
Yeah!
That's the thing.
And that's what I said. I said, did you hear from her? Were you worried? Nope, she just showed up like that was going to work. And if that's your first run, it's probably not going to be a good fit. But I think that is such a basic thing that, and I noticed this with like younger people too. You got to teach about being on time. Or even early, I think is such a great, skill set to have in business, because the person who shows up late all the time, they're late for everything.
Yeah.
Those people are not my people. I don't do lateness. That's not doesn't work for me.
Yeah, so you're setting the expectation.
Yeah, in my book, it was, this is what time we show up for work.
Yeah.
And also being, flexible, like if people have doctors or they have to do different things. There's a protocol on how we request time off or,
Thank you for saying that. So this is one of my big pet peeves, right? Vacation requests. They're requests, right? Employees don't just get to call up and say, hey, I've decided I'm taking a week vacation.
Yeah.
No, we have a policy that you have to, within at least 2 weeks in advance, it's got to be requested, we'll approve it. But employees, if you give up your rights as an employer, then it's so hard to grab them back. So you set the expectations. This is what we mean by this, and you follow the rules. We'll do whatever we can for you.
Yeah.
Right? That's our culture. But we have rights too as an employer. But too many employers they give them up too easily.
Yeah, no, I definitely think you need to set the table and have that conversation up front.
Absolutely.
We had a large renewal come at the end of the year. So December was always we had over 500 policies renew, and it was a lot. And so that time of year is always the time of year when everybody would want to kind of check out. Not for us. And we knew, as an organization, this was all hands on deck. Any other time of year, whatever. But the month of December, everybody was in-house. And our group understood it because that was part of, we all had an understanding that you couldn't leave one of your teammates, with the bulk of the workload. Granted, people get sick, things happen. But for the most part, I think setting that expectation is so important, and having the procedures and protocols. And the time off thing is always such a, I always love the unlimited PTO or, the normal PTO, whatever the normal PTO is. What is the industry trend? Does the unlimited PTO, people really take unlimited PTO? I always want to know.
Again, depending upon the position itself, sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. I know a lot of outside salespeople that have unlimited PTO. And the reason they're given unlimited PTO is, number one, they never tracked it properly to begin with.
Yep.
So they would take time off because they're outside. They're out doing sales. They could take 3-4 day week.
Put your numbers on the board. Who cares? Right?
Yeah. But it's very difficult because if you give somebody unlimited PTO, then it really becomes necessary to have metrics.
Yeah.
And are they getting the job done? Because if they're taking too much time off, you can't say you're using too much PTO. Well, no, it's unlimited. But now we're saying, look, these are the metrics that we have for your position. You're not hitting these. What are you going to be able to do? So yeah,
it's a slippery slope. But then on the
is.
other side of things, you want people to take PTO. You want people to go
they need to
and
recharge.
have some type of, I hate the word work-life balance because it doesn't exist. But the idea that someone takes time, checks out, goes and enjoys, the fruits of their labor, their families, etc. That is important to just an internal balance. And so I think there is a happy medium there. But then also understanding at certain times in different industries, you're obviously going to have, more workload than others. There are more preferred times to take off. And your employer would probably be happier than not.
I worked retail, right? When I was younger, and they had the red areas, or red line. You can't go from beginning of November through January because you had the Christmas season and you had inventory. So again, back to hiring. Mm-hmm. Are you setting those standards up front? Hey, look, if we're interviewing right now, these are the expectations. Here's the job, but also as far as time off, these are areas that are redlined. You cannot take time off through this period of time. So again, it's back to setting expectations, knowing what you need to cover with employees. It's just, but it can be done. There's a lot to it. Now it gets more and more complex, but it's not really complicated.
Yeah.
Just have that
So
list.
here's another one I see, because I mentor a lot of different agents, and they're rolling out new comp plans and they're rolling out things. You can't switch things up, right? Like, I think if you're going to set a policy forward, like here's your commission structure, or here's our PTO moment, and then 3 months later you go, I don't like that. Nothing I think is going to piss employees off more than you're messing around with their time off and their money, right? You gotta,
Don't
I think,
screw with money.
You shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on changing policies, within a firm? Is that something annually that would be an okay change? I think you got to leave it. I don't think you can make something and a month later or 2 months later change it up. I think you got to be consistent with your things.
Yeah. So first of all, employers are allowed to change policy.
You are allowed.
You are allowed to.
Yeah.
But again, the timing is very important. You can't do things retroactively. It's always best to start at the beginning of a new year.
Yes.
Because that's when most bonus plans take effect, or commission plans, things like that. Notify employees as early as possible. Make sure that they understand the reasoning behind it. That the employer is not just doing it because we're giving you too much money. No, there's a good business reason why we're doing it, and I think we don't share enough of those reasons with employees. So that's number one. Number two, for the employees, they don't like to see a bunch of changes because it makes them think that management doesn't know what's going on. So the employers, the management team, they need to have a well thought out plan. And even if it's not the best, once it's implemented, learn from it. If you got to take a little bit of a hit, my recommendation, again, I'm speaking generally right now, but take that hit for a little bit until you can come up with a better solution. Notify employees of what the change is going to be. Have people sign off on it, and then you implement properly the next version. You get one shot, right? Okay, we screwed up on this one.
That's it. Yeah.
But if you're doing 2 or 3
Yeah.
in a row, then you're really going to lose credibility.
One of my favorite policies to sell is an EPLI policy. I get, business insurance is my deal. And for years, you get people and they go, I don't know what I need. And I go, okay, well, first you got the slip, trip, and fall liability. Next you got the employees hurting themselves liability. And then as an employer, you've got to protect yourself. Yeah. Cyber and EPLI are my two most line item policies. I really firmly believe everybody needs one. Yeah. An EPLI policy is what's going to protect you from your wrongful terms, your sexual harassment, your discrimination. If a client harasses an employee, or not only first party but third party as well, which is huge.
Yeah.
And in California, we have this little thing called wage an hour, which is a whole nother. You've got a salaried employee versus an hourly employee, and that's a whole. A lot of carriers won't even write it, or they write a real low supplement in California because it's such a touchy situation. The EPLI policy. How important is that from your seat of somebody who's helping put all these processes in place?
If I always recommend talk to your broker, get it in there as quickly as possible. Yeah, because we talked about this, come up a couple of times. You can do the best thing possible, but you never know how somebody's going to react to it. And I wouldn't say that employees actually lie about things, but employees lie about things.
They do.
And so EPLI, if you don't have one, I would say you get your broker, call you, get out there and get it in place. And also cyber.
Cyber's huge. It's huge. Yeah. But the employer liability, a lot of business owner policies like a BOP, you can tack on, $100,000 or, $250,000. I say get a standalone policy because the defense costs alone that are built into these limits are huge. As you had mentioned earlier in our chat, these attorneys, right? Yeah. It used to be when there'd be an accident, you'd have the ambulance chasers. Well, now that there's a termination, you've got these guys, taking on cases that are so ridiculous, and it's a complete waste of everybody's resources and time. But guess what? You've got to respond to it as an employer, which means you've got to hire an attorney, which is probably going to cost you $10,000 just to make it go away. Yeah. As dumb as it is. You get people that are suing employers for discrimination, age gender, just everything you could possibly imagine. That's what the EPLI policy is designed to do. And there are a lot of carriers out there that are writing it. I can't say enough about a lot of the, the Philadelphia markets and, We write quite a lot with, Scottsdale. They've got an e-risk policy, which is great. $1 million limit on average, if you've got a smaller firm, probably $2,500 a year. And it kind of goes on up from there, but it's worth every penny.
It is. And it's funny, a few years back, because I do a lot of research on employment things, a lot of discrimination, harassment, you get these ads that pop up on Google, right? And one night I saw this ad pop up, are you being bullied at work? From an attorney.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, I got to click on this. And it's so important for everybody to understand that, again, in California specifically, and other states are getting this, you have workplace bullying, abusive conduct in the workplace, training that we have to do. Right now, you cannot get sued for bullying. However, they still market it that way. These attorneys, are you being bullied at work? I can get you money. But when you pull down the spreadsheet, or the checklist, they said, are any of these things happening to you? They're asking about wage and hour, leave laws, workplace safety, CalOSHA. All these different things are getting pulled in there because they can't sue an employer for bullying yet. But they want to get a good list. Okay, but we can go after them for all these different things.
And they just need one to trigger the policy. All you need is one, and now we've got a problem.
And so it is if it doesn't make good business sense not to have one of these policies in place. I'll tell you right now.
It is.
Big believer in that.
I have seen some of the most insane claims come through my desk for clients. Anything and everything you could possibly. Ageism. Clients saying rude things to the staff, and the staff turning around and suing for discrimination, even though it wasn't even something that you had anything to do with. It was somebody outside on the street that said something intermittently. There's so many different things. The policies, typically the limits I would say are $500,000 or $1 million. And the defense costs being inside and outside is always something that you can most of them are going to have defense inside, but you can purchase policies that have it outside. And what that basically means is you have a policy limit, and then you also have legal in addition to, which honestly, with the way these attorneys are, that's worth its weight in gold.
Well, it's so expensive to defend yourself these days. So having a policy in place, it is just, again, it's smart business. It really is.
And one of the things that these EPLI carriers are going to ask is, let's talk about your hiring practice, right?
Well, this comes back. You have to have the right things in place for the policy to be effective.
Exactly.
Because if you're just blowing off the training and like the harassment prevention training in California, if you're not keeping up with that, if you don't have the policies in place, if you're not responding, then the policies, no matter how great they are,
they're not going to kick in.
They're not going to do it for you. So you've got to have this all-encompassing thing. But again, it's not complicated. It can be complex, but it just takes time to decide you're going to do this and to put in the resources for it.
And a lot of the carriers too have built-in resources to help you get your handbook together. They will help you, draft your employment document. There's a lot of different things where you can have access to these different tools. Which I think is great. But one of the things we had chatted before we started recording was just like this ChatGPT situation. And it used to be when you wanted to have an employee handbook, you'd have to call an attorney and have them give you their template. It would cost you probably $1,500, and you plugged in all your information, and boom, there it was. Now you could probably go online and pop in your key factors and get a document. I would still have an attorney review it, though.
Even using a template from an attorney, if employees are putting in their own stuff, or employers are putting in their own information, language is so critical. And employers think, well, I've got the template, so all I have to do is put in what I want. But what they're putting in sometimes isn't the right thing. ChatGPT is so great for just to help you word a few things. The problem with having them do a handbook or any kind of legal document itself, but a handbook is something it's something that I can do, my consultants do. If you're not putting in the right information, you're not going to get the right output. Because again, depending on the size of the company and the industry, sometimes there are some laws that will apply to some but not others. So you really have to know. And so if you're going to do it and then
have
to save time, have somebody review it,
Yeah.
that would be fine. But don't just rely on ChatGPT. It's you get what you put in.
Yeah.
So
no, it's when you're starting your business or you're starting your agency, you think to yourself like, I don't need that, or I don't need an HR, it's just me, or it's just me and my two people.
Yeah.
Having somebody in your back pocket like yourself is great to be able to lean and ask questions and maybe get some of this insight, because like we mentioned, things are constantly changing.
They are.
I mean, the way that people are hiring, the way that people are working, the way that the laws are, the things that can be sneaking up and be a problem that we don't even think could be a problem.
Yeah.
There's all these different things as far as new rules and regs. Like, what are some of the things that you have heard about that are, tacking on to some of this AI business that we had chatted about earlier?
Yeah, AI is getting complicated. First of all, defining all this new technology is going to be difficult. But there's a new law that California is considering right now. It's been drafted. I think it's in committee right now. Nothing's been approved, but they're talking about if employers are using AI in anything that they make decisions with. If it's hiring, it's promoting, giving raises to, then there are going to be considerations that they have to do. They have to let employees know that they're going to be using it. Employees will have an opportunity to opt out of these things. So if you have an applicant, you're using some kind of AI system to determine, okay, does this person have the skill set we need? If it is, I think it's machine learning is one of the terms that they use, then this may fall under this law, which means if a candidate says, yeah, I want a job, but I don't want to take this, again, law has to be finalized and come out. I don't know if it will, because it's kind of a strange law right now. But it does throw a lot of things into a very difficult area, because I mentioned the assessments earlier. One of the things that we use is a very good assessment tool for job fit, but it is a machine learning. We talk about cognitive ability, right? The vocabulary as well as mathematics. And if they start everybody with a medium question on math, and if the person gets that right, then it goes to a harder question. If they get that question wrong, it drops down to an easier one. And they give them a number of these questions. They try to get to the point where, okay, we feel comfortable that this is where the person is mathematically, what their cognitive ability is in math, verbal and reasoning. So now, is this going to fall under this law, and what are the options for employers? Because it's not just applicants, it's current employees. If we're looking at you, okay, you're going to fit this new job, well, yeah, I want the job, but I don't want to take this assessment. Yeah, so there are a lot of things.
And then they opt out, and then you're like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
And then if you don't move forward, then are you discriminating?
Yeah. So California is really good. We've had the new paid sick leave has increased lately. We have designated person recently for not just sick leave, but also under the CFRA, where an employer or an employee can take time off, not to care just for a family member, but it can be a designated person now.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to keep up with these things for employers, and I do.
Well, and I think being fluid and flexible as an employer is important, because life isn't in a box all the time. And if we've learned anything over the last 5 years, I mean, life is, it can go in a really weird directions really quickly, and we all gotta pivot and change and redirect the way we think. And I think being an employer that's, okay with people, having to take a little time here and there, or, hey, if you need to go to the doctor and leave early, and, you're able to continue to do your work, or have somebody pick up this, whatever. Like, being flexible and being okay with people living life, I think, is important, because work and life and balance and all these different things, these buzzwords we keep hearing, I mean, it's, we as employers get to set the tone for the type of environment that we want to have.
You set your culture.
So if it's, it's in this box and everybody in there is going to be just all the time, I mean, it cannot be the best cultural moment for anybody. Who wants to be in that world? I don't.
No, and this is such a good thing that you're bringing up, because a lot of business owners, I've had so many of them get angry, and not at me, just say, look, this is the law. Well, this is a dumb law, and why do we have to do this? And I kind of let them vent. It's like, I don't want to do this. I said, well, you don't have to. And they looked at me like, I don't. I said, no, you're the owner, or you're the man. You don't have to do this. But let me tell you what may happen. And I think the most important thing is, like you said, even in California, with as onerous as these laws are, you can be such a successful business. And if you have good employees, if they need a little bit more time off, that's fine. Make sure that they're okay, because what you're going to get in return is a happy employee, but you're also going to get a cheerleader, because they're going to tell all the other employees, especially the ones that are grousing and griping, like, what are you complaining about? They took care of me. These are good people. But it comes back down to wanting to do the right thing.
Yes.
And just understanding none of this stuff it's really not that bad.
Well, and having a mutual respect for each other, right? Like, when you start to get to be taken advantage of, or they, as the employees, start to be feeling taken advantage of, that's not a good line to cross. But, going back to just, my girlfriend said this to me many years ago, why she started a company. It was, she wanted to start a company that she wanted to work for. right? She created a
That's
space
perfect.
that
That's
she was
perfect.
like excited to walk in the door and be a part and surround herself with these incredible people that also felt the same way. And I think that's really the goal that any employer should have.
Well, we lose track of it, and again, I understand the employers, especially business owners, they put their life into this, and they took all the risk, so they want it their way, and I completely understand. You have to have a company identity, company culture, but if you have employees taking advantage of you, then deal with that employee. You can't assume that every employee is like that, because you've got some great employees out there, some that you don't even realize are these what they call diamonds in the rough.
Yeah.
They're there, and you're so spot on with your approach to it. Look out for your employees, and by and large, they will look out for you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, a lot of people are in transition. There's a lot of movement within different industries right now. I mean, there's a lot of just, there's a lot going on in our world. I mean, take
Sometimes too much.
Every day it's a new deep breath that
Absolutely.
we take. But I think too, there's a lot of movement and a lot of really qualified people that are in positions now that they maybe thought they weren't going to be into. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of, we're going to see, I'm hoping in our industry of insurance, just a little bit more of a moving of the pendulum of the types of people coming in, types of people going out. Because, the average age for the insurance guy is, I think, like 65. And now these other folks are coming in and changing industries. And I think it's an interesting concept as we get out there and we look to hire. How are we hiring? How can we be better at hiring?
Well, yeah, and again, so you have an older group that is transitioning out, right? Hopefully they're going to be retired, they're going to be fun, have fun, and be happy. But I've seen industries where you have these individuals who are entrenched.
Yes.
And the new people coming in, they have these ideas like, no, we've never done it that way. Well, that's fine, but things are changing. Maybe you should do it these ways. You do have so many good, smart, intelligent people who see things differently, especially from other industries.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean everything's going to be fine, but maybe you can take a piece of what they want to do. But you don't want to quench that fire. Hey, want to do something? I want to make like your friend. I want to have a company, or I want to work in a company that I want to be in.
Yeah.
And you have employees that are coming in, they're saying, I'm going to try this out, I've got great ideas. You know what? Let them enjoy that. Let them fall down and skin their knees a few times. What is it? Experience comes from, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment.
Yeah.
Right? So the new kids on the block coming in, let them try a few things. If it doesn't work, great. But there may be a piece that we can take.
Well, and I also think as an employer, being open to collaboration, and the old tried and true things that maybe worked for years and years.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody comes in and says, "Hey, maybe this would be a cooler way to do it," or maybe we've got this new technology that we could bring. I mean, I think a lot of the issue with the insurance industry and some of the good old boys that are kind of set in their stone ways. They're realizing that this technology and the way that the industry is going, it's requiring a shift.
Yes.
And they've got to bring in some more youthful, mindset into, hey, we've got to get on the bus here because the bus is leaving, and we got to make sure we're on it.
Well, and just the advancements we've had in technology over the last 5 years. Can you imagine what it's going to be in the next 5 years?
No.
It's just going to be tremendous, horrendous, and tremendous at the same time. But you have to have people who can keep up with that.
Well, I'm glad that you're keeping us up in the know of what we need to know. So how would someone engage with you? If we've got, people listening going, hey, I need this guy. I need some help. How do we get in touch?
Oh, we've got a website, hiringdoneright.com. Can I give out a phone number? Is that
We'll put it in our show notes there, yeah.
There'll be a phone number out there for you, but just give me and an email and just reach out to me. I've got a couple consultants that work with me. We have great programs out there, and we're small enough where we can customize a lot for individuals, especially brokers. I work with a lot of brokers, and I want them to be taken care of because they are employers. They look out for their clients.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't take care of themselves. They neglect themselves. So
what do they say? The shoe guy's got the cobbler's got holes in his shoes.
Yeah,
I think that's the story of all of our insurance agents' ownership lives.
Yeah. So
and I
reach out.
think having someone like you in your toolbox, as your own little personal board of directors, just when it comes to having somebody to bounce off, some ideas, get some templates together, understand, what the rules and regs are. Are you skilled in other states too, or primarily just here in California?
No, we work with other states.
Yeah. Is California the tougher of all the states?
There's some northeastern states, actually, the coastal states, northeast and then up and down the west coast they're all getting a lot like California.
Yeah.
But the laws are very, very similar. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a matter of knowing where the person is, and we can help out wherever. But it's fun. It really is.
It's a good time. I think that sometimes you probably have to just shake your head though with some of the things that you see come through with what do I do about this? And you're like, whoa, this is a new one.
Yeah, I've been getting some new ones lately. But again, our underlying goal, especially mine, right? I love small business.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was an entrepreneur. I want them to succeed first and foremost. And if we just need to have a chat, we can talk about what their needs are. I'll tell you. I'll even give them some free advice. Look at these things. But if you want to engage us, I would love to put something together for them. But it's if they don't have somebody in HR that they feel comfortable with. And I would like to just say there's some payroll companies out there that offer HR. A lot of it is just a kind of a call center.
Yeah.
One of the benefits that we have is they have a primary consultant, and we know if they're asking the right question or not after a while.
Yeah.
And that becomes we're part of that team.
But I think that becomes a part of any life cycle of a business. When you can't wear all the hats. And
you can't.
And sometimes you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know until you maybe get sued or you have something come on your desk and you're like, well, that was
well before
a flaming grenade. Now I got to deal with it. And so I think having someone like yourself that is knowledgeable you could turn to and have it's not a huge expense. It's just having another kind of coach on the bench here that can help get you back in.
Yeah, I don't like gouging.
Yeah.
I've got employers that have been with me for over 20 years because
Mm-hmm.
they like what we do. I was just with a restaurant owner earlier today who has 3 restaurants, and she was saying, I hate this. I said, I can tell you don't have a lot of stuff. But we're coming up with a plan for her, identifying somebody who can help assist her with that admin. So we try to get them up to speed as quickly as possible, as inexpensively as possible, because we're looking for long-term relationships and
yeah.
however we can assist.
I mean, people are my love language. Like, I love people. That's how I thrive.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be honest with you, sitting in that seat of, someone coming up and having the, so-and-so's not, making them upset, or I need this day off, or I can't show up for work on. I mean, that stuff as a business owner, it's part of the job, but it's also just, you don't know how to deal with it until you're posed with it. And then sometimes you don't maybe deal with it right, or you don't know what the right thing is. And so getting these procedures in place and these books and these different tools can help you kind of break through all the noise and hopefully avoid getting yourself into any trouble.
Well, it gives you a little peace of mind, so you can sleep better because you have some compliance things in place.
Yeah.
And once you see it lined up, it's like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought. There is a lot to it. But once it's lined up, it's like, okay, we can manage this. And with business owners, again, it's just, maybe you're not the person to do all this. You shouldn't be.
No.
You're strategic. So can you identify somebody that can handle a lot of this administrative stuff?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about what that would entail and the kind of person you need.
Yeah, because imagine if you
doing
could be out selling or be out, getting more of what you need to build your book and not dealing with the noise of, just the day-to-day business
Keep
ops.
your clients happy.
It's okay to outsource some stuff sometimes, especially the things that we're not good at.
Well,
and we're all not good at what you do.
Yeah.
Trust me, I know I'm not.
Well, thankfully. That's
why we need you.
That's why I'm here.
So the bottom line, guys, is, hiring and terminating, there is a science to it. Make sure we've got a company handbook in place. Make sure we've absolutely got an EPLI policy.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is, if you heard nothing today.
Well, that's the easiest thing to do. So that should be done first and foremost.
Before you even, turn this podcast off. Like, make sure you've got that as an agency owner, you need to have that at any industry.
Yeah.
HiringDoneRight.com is where we can find a little bit more information. I can't say thank you enough. I think we all were kept a little bit more up to speed.
I hope so. Thank you very much.